Okay, Waldek, so nice to see you today. Happy Saturday. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very
Just
special.
having fun.
Usually we do these interviews, during the week, everything's chaotic. We're just like, it's so nice to be, I feel like a little bit slower today and refreshed and ready to talk to you about your work. For everyone who's joining us, this is Waldek Dynerman. He is an artist and educator, and you're in Wisconsin right now. Is that right?
In Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a place that I've had the pleasure of visiting actually. So it's nice to be connected with an artist there. And thank you for being with me today.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to be here.
So I'd love to start, Valdik, with understanding your personal background. You have a really interesting story and family history, and I'd like to understand where art became a part of that story.
I have a very good story about how I became an artist, which is pretty much true. Irving Stone wrote a very schmaltzy, kitschy book about its fictionalized biography of Vincent van Gogh called Last for Life. There was also a movie made based on that book with Kirk Douglas as Van Gogh. And we happened to have a copy of this book at my parents' home, and I read it when I was probably only 13 or 14. And the book really emphasizes how unhappy Van Gogh was and how unsuccessful as an artist. And after I read it, I decided that I wanted to be an unhappy and unsuccessful artist. I mean, this is for real.
Wow. Most people, they
Yeah,
chase the money or they chase the stardom, and you're like, I want to be.
yeah, I wanted to suffer. I wanted to suffer.
Very
It
poetic,
really,
but challenging.
it stirred my imagination. It really appealed to, a teenager growing up and like trying to figure out what to do in life. Yeah. So that was the beginning.
Oh my goodness, so cool. And when you started, so you read this book, you said, I'm going to be a frustrated artist. What was your next step? Did you go to school for art? Did you just start
Well,
on services?
I had to finish high school first. So yeah, so I continued for 3 more years in high school, and then I went on to study at the Warsaw Academy of Fine Arts at the Faculty of Painting, and I got my MFA there in painting.
So you said the Warsaw Academy of Art. So that's not in the US.
Well, there is Warsaw somewhere in Illinois, I believe, or somewhere in Midwest, but that Warsaw was in Poland, the capital city of Poland. I was born and raised there.
Wow. When you were entering that academy and you were thinking about your art, I know that eventually your family's history and, like politics came into being an important theme. Was that always the case, or what was that like?
It was pretty much the case from the start. Maybe not exactly when I began my studies, because you study with painting models and still lifes and all of that fairly traditional training. But my thesis work was already attempting to speak about daily life in Poland. Poland was under communist rule at the time, and also in a quite bad economic situation. And in fact, my paintings were overinterpreted as harshly anti-government. And my thesis showed the the room, it was quite a large room where I had my work, and some of the work was gigantic. I made two of the many paintings I showed. I made two that were about 15 feet tall. Yeah. So
Wow.
they actually locked my show and didn't allow the public to see it.
And this was at your end of high school or end of college?
That was the end of the academy.
So you were like 18 years old and the government.
No, eight of academy. I was 23, going 24.
And still,
that was
like Waldek is a threat. His art is.
That was my master thesis show, and yeah, I was a threat to the country. Yeah.
Oh my
I
goodness.
was actually at the time I was worried that they may withhold my diploma, and without a diploma, I could be conscripted to the army, because army service was mandatory at that time in Poland.
Wow.
Except if you are a student and a graduate, you know. So I think I really thought more about it than, you know, there wasn't really that threat, but they were like at some point so mad at me, and I always laugh at it when I think about it.
In the moment, were you laughing? Like I would have been really
No,
scared.
I'm laughing now. At the moment, I was angry. That the problem was that the work was definitely over interpreted as political. I wasn't that political in that work at all. That was the funny part. That it was just a complete sort of paranoia on the part of the schools faculty. Yeah, they just wanted to cover all their bases. There was a vice provost that was a party member and was like heavily involved in communist politics, because the academy itself was not, you know, but, you know, he was the communist hand in the school. He was the vice provost. And he was just furious with how I set up the show. And my paintings were not really political. They started to be like interpreting daily life much more right after I left the school. That was like just introduction. But if you saw the paintings, you would never think they were political. But anyhow, it was fun because people would actually break into my show to see it, you know.
That's kind of cool though. I mean, you created intrigue unintentionally by like
very unintentionally.
That's amazing though. And as a graduate student currently, you know, just even though you're mentioning of a thesis makes me so curious about what is a thesis in arts education? Like what were you tasked with doing with your work?
It's different than here. You know, I've been teaching here for 37 years, and thesis here, even though it's only a BFA and mine was MFA, seems to be a bit more rigorous. And I don't know how it is now in Poland, but when I was doing my master's, we were writing a thesis about on the chosen topic, and we had a thesis advisor for our written part of the thesis, and then just the work, and we would have a main professor that was advising us throughout thesis, and then the thesis show, and the person who was the written thesis advisor would speak to the commission about the content of the thesis. He was, I believe, the only person that actually read it. Because I wrote horrible things in it, because I was very unhappy with my education at the academy, like throughout all 5 years. I thought professors were not very involved, and just I felt like I was just teaching myself, So I wrote all of that, and
In
I
the
was,
thesis itself.
I was like mad,
Wow.
and I said these professor, and I see today how I exaggerated, and I see that I must have been a real pain in the neck at the time. But because nobody really commented on that, I imagine they never read it.
You're like, there's some stuff in there. If you read it, you would you would be talking to me.
Yeah, I think so.
So you were given a topic, or you were asked to create a topic. Like you said, your topic was less political than they thought. What was the topic that you had?
Well, we were to choose a topic for our written dissertation. The work, the paintings, we had complete freedom. We didn't have to stick to one thing. We didn't have to write about that. Like our written dissertation could be about our work, but didn't have to. So I wrote about something very different, and the thesis were just continuation of my paintings that I've been making at the time. Yeah.
So I took some time to read, your artist statement, and we've spoken before, and it's something that I think is really interesting in your work. Well, first, you describe your work as a chain link, and that's why I'm really curious about where you started, because where you've come to is so powerful and tells so many important stories. I think that the tie-ins to politics are especially interesting. Could you speak a little bit about why that is interesting to you, and why you choose to respond to it? Because personally, like, I can't, politics feels over my head, or maybe overwhelming, and I run away from it, but you run towards it, which I think is really interesting.
In Poland, when growing up in Poland, we were very political. Polish people were very political at that time. I think they still are. They talk politics at all. Talks politics very often. So we followed politics, and we talked about politics. And Poland was going through a tough period at the time when I was a student, because the economy was beginning to contract and collapse, and it was becoming more and more evident that the communist system is not working, and people were more and more unhappy, and there was a beginning of popular protests that were very violently responded to with police and secret service, and people put in jail, and in these, and this would be happening every couple of years. There would be this and this and this, and this industry would go on strike. So there was always like the level of discontent in the country was growing, and it would be really hard to ignore it. You live it every day. You see how dysfunctional everything is, and then you hear the propaganda on the radio and television telling you how great it is. you know, so, you know, you would have like two realities, the official one in the media and, you know, what the lives people lived. That was a very different story. So, you know, I could not ignore that. I mean, that was my setup, I guess, uh, you know, I didn't want to be treated like I'm some mindless little a little part of the system that can't think for himself or can do things that are, you know, independent from what one is supposed to do. It's a, you know, I mean, when you paint, you're not a revolutionary, you know, you just paint, you know, but yeah, but it also allowed a great degree of freedom, you know, to be an artist at that time. And, you know, there was a lot of art at that time. So it would be like 70s and early 80s in Poland. That was very political, much more political than mine.
Wow, I can't imagine what it was like to be a part of that and the influence that it would have. At that time, did you know that you were going to end up in Wisconsin, or um, how did how did that happen?
Uh, Really, just serendipity. Uh, I wanted to come to. I've been traveling a little bit in Europe to the degree that it was possible under communism. They always made it difficult for you to travel, but I was traveling in Europe and wanted to come to the US, but didn't want to come as a tourist. Wanted to come maybe for a couple months and actually be part of something here so that I can really learn about the country. So I thought, okay, I start looking for a teaching job. And through a very dear friend of mine, a today retired literature professor at UWM Medicine, whom I met in Warsaw. This is how we met first.
Wow.
So Robert Sklut, he heard of the opening at Mayat, and he heard about it, and the last day that one could apply, he applied for me. He knew I was looking for something. He applied for me and then cabled me, sent me a cable to Warsaw. Is it okay that
Wow,
he
what a friend.
applied for this particular job? And then, you know, I interviewed over the phone. And I don't know what they were thinking at Maya, but they hired me based on a phone interview. And, you know, 2 months later, I was in Milwaukee.
Oh my goodness. And this was so you've been in Milwaukee for a long time now, right? And you said there was a cable involved in communicating with you. So I'm thinking that your interview wasn't on Zoom, right? Like this was a transatlantic
It
phone
was
call. Like, was it? I mean, that's just I can't imagine. I don't think many people were interviewing across the Atlantic at the time. I think that's pretty special.
Yeah, and they were. I don't think they were able to see any of my work because, you know, to see my work, one would have to send photographs via mail or slides. Yeah, it was, you know, yeah. Ron Bedex, who was a painting professor at Mayat, who was on the search committee and who was interviewing me. Well, he had enough imagination and, you know, to say, hey, why not? If he wants to come here for a salary that can barely pay for anything because it was part-time, you know, But for me, it was just a great opportunity. So I came for 1 year as a visiting instructor.
Amazing. And was there a specific course that you taught? Like, have you taught a bunch of different
Yeah,
things?
what did I teach? I taught 2 courses in drawing.
Wow.
I taught 2 courses in drawing. Yeah.
Well, I think it's so cool that your work spans. I mean, you draw, you paint, you sculpt. There's a lot of different things that we can dive into that I'm excited to look at with you. So what I'll do is I'll pull up my screen because I think that'll be a great backdrop to understand your process more and your works. Your website is so great at cataloging the many things that you do. But, as you and I decided, we started at like 2017, 18, as far back as we'd go to fit in this conversation, just a few that really stood out to me. And then I can't wait to hear about from your perspective. So, Waldek, you can take it away with the cement paintings. Well, first of all, I really like the glitter and the pink words, but I don't know what they mean. So maybe you can enlighten me because I'm sure there's more to it than that.
Yeah. So these are not very characteristic, actually, but I'm glad you pulled them up. For the cement paintings, because they were more like paintings, so they were image based, but they were made with cement, with colored cement, etc. But I also made some work based on text, because I was always interested in experimentation and have done all kinds of things that were strange, different, innovative, unexpected for me, etc. And working with text always intrigued me, but I haven't done a lot of it. So these were, there are a couple more pieces, text-based, that from this time. And the one to the left is a title of Gauguin's painting, Femme et Cheval Blanc, Women and a White Horse, a painting that he made while living in Tahiti, in Polynesia. And actually, there are 3 in the series, and the other two are on my wall.
Oh, no way.
One, and you can see them on the website as well. And the one is a slab of plaster with cement letters saying "Still life with glass of absinthe and a carafe." And it's in a gold and gilded frame, fake gilded frame. And that's a title, it's an English title, so it must be a translation of Vincent van Gogh painting. And the third one is Mont Sainte-Victoire, the mountain of Saint Victoria. One of Cézanne's paintings, a title of the Mount Victoria that he painted many times. And those 3 artists were very influential when I was growing up, like Van Gogh, Cézanne and Gauguin were very, and they are important for everybody. They are more or less the founders of modernism, I would say. So this was sort of tongue-in-cheek, my homage to those 3 great artists. And the one to the right, I think everybody is asking themselves, am I good enough? Am I trying hard enough? So I had a mirror lying around, and perhaps no other ideas that particular day. So, grabbed some letters, dipped them in cement, glued them to the mirror, created this cement frame. So,
I love that. I think it's so cool the difference of like the one being just kind of like serendipitous, like thought, and the other one coming from like years of inspiration. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your day-to-day creative process. So you go into the studio, do you even know if you're going to do a sculpture or a painting? Like, how does that come about?
It's a continuous process, and much more so in the last couple of years when I was teaching a lesser load, and now that I'm retired, because I am either in the studio working, or I'm thinking of what I'm going to be doing when I'm in the studio. And that's pretty much, now that I do not teach, and my children are all grown up, that's pretty much what I do. So this is why it's like chain links, you know. My head is always there in one way or another. And you know, I told you before we got started that I'm in the process of painting, probably finishing the newest painting that I only started a few days ago. And that painting came out, some of the things I did in it, out of the painting that I made before some 2 weeks ago. And it may be things either thematic, or they can be a particular type of a mark, or a particular way of handling paint, or diluting paint, or playing with viscosity of paint, or maybe trying a different kind of a brush, or maybe a different composition. So you know, a painting is, it may not look like it, but it is an extremely complex thing. There are so many things that go into making a painting that one cannot think of all of them. A lot of it is happening on an intuitive level. A lot of it is memory. A lot of it is experience during painting. But it is a very complex process. And there are so many parts that it's really easy to just change a few parts in the whole machine that the painting is, and you get something different. I'm always interested in you know, not repeating in essence anything that I have made. So yeah, so the painting I made 2 weeks ago was me taking a selfie of a burning car. And the one I'm making right now is an underwater site of trash floating in the ocean. So I didn't make another fire painting and a whole series of fire paintings, and probably I will not make another water painting. I probably, you know, I'm already thinking, because I think this painting will be done tomorrow. I'm already thinking, you know, what's going to be the next one. I know I have to order a canvas, because I just used up all my last supply of canvas. So
wow, maybe earth, air, like add some more elements in there, like the avatar.
Yeah, maybe a change in the color scheme. The color is changing. Yeah, there are so many things that one can change, that, you know, it's always that's the interesting part.
Would you say that the chain in these two is the material of the cement, or would it be something different?
Oh, definitely. The handling of materials is one of the things that connects connects sculptures, paintings, etc. Same with painting. When I started this body of paintings, the most recent one, after I finished the working with cement, I went from painting thin to painting very thick, to painting on the floor and spilling the paint and actually walking on the painting while painting, and then thinner again and then thicker again. And you know, but manipulation of the paint is really kind of the same for me as manipulation of cement was, or the other way around. I treated cement the way I treat paint. So I was playing with cement, trying to, like the one to the left, famous Cheval Blanc. The gray shape is cement, and it's on a piece of plywood, and underneath I poured a thin layer of plaster, so that's the white that you see. I created some sort of a border, I'm thinking, I can't remember. And then I poured cement on the top of it, so you can see how it kind of found its shape. Yeah. And you know, one of the things I liked was that I didn't want to intervene with that. You know, I tried to be true to the materials, and I respect the way materials behave. I do the same with paint. I try not to over manipulate the paint. And then, you know, as the cement was setting, I would have to right away put the letters in before it's set. So I think I had them prepared first, you know.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really cool how you see the connections and like how you use the materials. Maybe other painters would just be like, I know how to do this with paint, but you're saying, I know how to do this with paint, which means I can do the same thing with cement. Just that freedom in taking on different like materials for similar processes, I think probably creates a lot of opportunities. You also, and as I go to the next picture, you talked about like just like the complexities in your studio space. And I'm remembering now an image I saw of your studio on your Instagram. It makes me curious of, you know, when you're in your creative process, is it dead silent? Are you listening to music? Like, what's it like to be in the studio in Waldek's head when this stuff's happening?
It's not silent at all. I recently, like over the last maybe year in the pandemic, I started listening to audiobooks when painting. So I always have audio when I work. It's very I don't register a lot of what's going on there. I've been listening to Agatha Christie's stories. I'm close to, she was incredibly prolific, and I think I'm now close to probably knowing everything she ever wrote, especially those read by David Suchet, who was also Inspector Poirot in the movie version. Just great. But yeah, so that's playing, but also in my past, I would have certain music that I would play, and because my studio, I don't have very many neighbors here. I can blast it, so sometimes it would be very, very loud. Recently, my music choice, if I choose to listen to music, is Miles Davis, which is a great studio music, because it's very ambient. It really puts me in a zone. You know, it's like
that's so cool.
Clears my head.
I have a paper to write tonight. I'm gonna try some Miles Davis, see if it does the same thing in the essay writing. I'm not so sure it will, but I like I'll take the recommendations I can get. So I love this one. I'm really excited to hear more about it. I just think sculpture is so fascinating. I don't know anything official about it, but I'm really intrigued.
Okay, so this was I tried a couple of things here. So first of all, there is a skeleton. So there is a deaf figure in it. I very rarely directly refer to death, almost as if drawing a skull or drawing a skeleton would actually bring bad luck, and I mean, for an educated college professor, that's not a good.
But we feel what we feel. I get that.
A good thing to admit, but kind of like I think that indirectly I have spoken very often about death and trauma in my work, but directly very rarely, really only in the series of drawings devoted to the Holocaust, made about 25 years ago, something like that. So I was going to see if I can tame the subject, if I can, work with a skull, and I made it full of color, and I put like fake eyes in it, and it's like kind of lighthearted, but there's like a dark underbelly there. And then I was so the deaf, so to speak, is kind of embracing the chair and kind of looking down on whatever I would put on the chair. And I put many different. I tried many different figures, heads, torsos. I switched them around. So it was in a way, even though it's sculpture, in a way like sketching and drawing, trying to come up with different solutions. And then I have this habit of documenting the stages so that I remember what I did. And I'm glad that I did it, because this setup in this form does not exist anymore, but it could, because I think I have some of the parts, not all of them. I think the figure on the chair became a different sculpture. I'm not sure, but that was pretty much something about the relationship with death, and something about relationship with people, and something about relationship between people and nature, somewhere around those parameters, ideas.
There's so much that I value in this one, and I think you could even see like a spiritual kind of lens to it too. Like when you look at it from the right side image, it reminds me of almost that like iconic like Mary and Jesus kind of like thing where she's holding the child. But what I think also is really special here is that you confronted something inside of you, which was this discomfort with death, and like did what you needed to like bring it out, and like use this as like almost a safe space to experiment with that. And I think that's a really important part of the artistic process of, and what it can help us understand about ourselves maybe, and change in ourselves if we want to be able to confront it. So that's really cool. This one also very captivating. I can't wait to understand it.
Very simple. I was riding my bike from school to my studio, and there is this space on the way that looks like a storage of something. It's not a store. There is no public access there, and in the window there was a doll, or there were maybe two dolls. One was the body made of fabric, and there was another doll. And I just took a photograph, and I do that all the time. I photograph anything that I think may I may be able to use in the studio. I may want to use in the studio later. And then one day I was, usually this kind of work is done when I don't do anything else. It's kind of part killing time and part exploration or research. I also had another picture of a gas station near my studio with this beautiful sky, beautiful sunset, and the combination of the gas station light right next to doll's head. And so it's like daylight mixing with artificial light. There's this moment between, it's too dark to really not have light, but not dark enough to really need light. And then I was thinking, okay, let's see what's going to happen with the doll. I worked with images of mannequins and dolls quite a bit throughout my life, always some haunting content there. So this particular image didn't lead me any further. Maybe someday it will, but at this point, I did it and I put it aside, and I didn't know what to do else with it. But I do those digital visualizations these days quite a bit, where I create these photoshopped collages of various photographs, either taken from internet or my own, and I mix them and match them and rework them and try to find something that I will feel interesting enough to make me want to paint it. I sometimes did that with sculptures, but with sculptures, I didn't need that process. With sculptures, it was more, I found an object and the object would start talking to me. But with paintings, before I used to draw, before I would start painting, and now I play with photo collages before I start painting.
What an interesting process. And I think, you talked about like finding mannequins, and I think what's maybe one of the chains to the digital visualization is like you found this doll, you maybe didn't take it with you, but you took it with you in the form of a photograph. And that is a great way to accumulate like this collection of materials, or in this case of photos that serendipitously it feels like maybe get incorporated into your work at the moment. Maybe you don't know how they will, but it becomes a quick way to catalog them, and a great use of the technology.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But this one, you really did find these pieces. I remember you telling me about, was this part of like the experience in Michael's and the crazy flower realization? Okay, let's go there.
So when I worked on my sculptures and also these, my main art supply store were Home Depot and Michael's. This is where I would go for not only materials but inspiration. Like I could get lost in Home Depot just looking at different kinds of metal braces and cement and plaster and mud for plastering dry walls and various tools. Sometimes I would look at a tool and I would say, oh, with that tool, I could do this. You know, I use a lot of electric conduits in my work. I used to install electricity in my work, so I would go for wires, and I'm probably a half electrician by now, and maybe a half plumber, because I would also like use plumbing pipes for stuff, and Michael's also. You know, they have glass marbles and colored sand and metal letters, and like the things that I could never think of, you know, because these are random things. And I mean, you don't just sit and imagine random things, you have to see them. So I would go there and yeah, so I saw, as I told you before, I saw these fake flowers there. And that just amazed me, because I was there and I literally had to touch it to see that these were not real. I mean, it's bizarre. It was a very strange feeling, and that there were these. It felt like a greenhouse, except it didn't smell flowers, which made it even more weird. And I started buying these, not knowing what I will make with them, but I bought a few of this, a few of that. And, you know, once you have them in your studio, you know, you start making something, and then you just grab it and you like put it somewhere, and it either works or it doesn't. If it doesn't, you know, these can be like cut and reshaped, and you know, so they are actually quite there are many choices to work with these. And at one point, but very quickly actually, I figured out I can dip them in colored plaster. So the red roses, I believe, were dipped in red plaster, and there's like, I don't even know names for these flowers. The one above the red roses, the white ones with little petals. Yeah, and also transformation of you know, the fabric they were made of into a solid object was very, very interesting.
It's
Yeah,
captivating. I see little like letters there too, I think. If I look closer, I'm just noticing new
maybe.
things
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
now too. Oh my goodness. It's like the
Yeah.
I Spy books. You like find different things when you come back to it. I think what you said too about Home Depot was really fun and a great inspiration for me. You know, during COVID, like we don't leave the house very often, but yesterday I really wanted to go outside. So I went to like Target and I just walked around the aisles. But now I'm thinking I should go to Home Depot and I should try to find ways to like think about it more artfully than just, you know, I always associated with like construction work or like home, I don't know, DIY, but it seems like there could be much more creative looks at it too. So that's really exciting.
There's
Um,
a lot of great stuff there. Yeah.
yes, we don't have a Michael's, but I'll have to find like a Hobby Lobby or something for the other part, for the other part of that. And then the Berlin residency. So I guess at some point you went to Berlin, Waldek. What was that? How did you end up in that opportunity?
I was looking for, I always like to go back to Europe, and I like to travel. I don't like to travel as a tourist. So an artist residence is a good way to be in a country for a prolonged amount of time, period of time. Yeah, so I applied. I was admitted. I applied with work. I said what I would be doing, and I went there for 3 months in 2019. I was also very interested in learning about Berlin, thinking that maybe I could go back there for longer, because Berlin is really not anymore, but Berlin up until maybe 10 years ago was what New York was in the 50s, you know?
No way.
Very vibrant, very free-spirited, people from all over the world, very cosmopolitan. Everybody minds their own business. I mean, there is nothing you could do that is legal that would draw people's attention.
Wow.
You know, you can wear whatever you want. You can yeah, it's just very accepting and very liberal. So I just, you know, wanted to and supposedly having a very dynamic art scene. So I wanted to see that, be part of it. So I spent 3 months there. I made a weird, maybe a very impractical choice of working with sculpture there, but that was because I was in the middle of my sculpture period. You know, so I didn't think of, okay, if you make sculptures, how are you going to get it out of Berlin? I somehow didn't think about it. So as I told you, the work is now in storage in Berlin for close to 2 years, and I still don't know what to do with it. But it was a great stay. I met some wonderful people. Berlin is a great city to live in and to work in. And I'm looking forward to going back there for sure. And I have to, because I have to get my sculpture.
Yeah, you have a great excuse. I only learned about residencies in the past couple of months through these kind of conversations. And the woman I spoke to was at a residency in Georgia. So there's mostly people, you know, from the US and stuff like that. I imagine that, well, you tell me, like the residency in Berlin, was it more international? Were you meeting people from all over the world? And how did you like, what do people have to do to be part of that sort of experience? 3 months sounds like an incredible opportunity.
It is, however, you have to understand that majority of residences are not paid, so you have to self-finance. Okay.
Less glamorous.
Yeah. Well, this one was when I was there. There was a painter who was actually a resident artist there. He lives in Berlin, and he was Brazilian. And there was another artist who was Italian. I was Polish American. And at the end of my residency, they came an artist from Ireland. And some of the staff, one woman was from Belgium. Pretty cosmopolitan. Where we had our studios, there were also artisan studios. So there was a woodworker that was American.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
being around those people, I mean, is the benefit just, developing like relationships with people who are similarly interested, or is their work inspiring your work while you're there? Like, does that happen too? Or did that happen?
It's both. I'm thinking it's both. I think that the place is always an inspiration. Like Berlin is a different planet compared to large cities in the United States, and a different galaxy compared to Milwaukee. So that must inspire you, and it's a city with a pretty dynamic showing scene. So you go to all kinds of shows, and hopefully you find inspiration there and find people to talk to. People in Berlin are very easy to talk to, and you can get by with English because many speak English, although not as many as I was made to believe, that like everybody speaks English, you don't have to know German. It's not true, but still you could, compare to France, day and night difference.
Yeah.
Although I love French. Okay, so.
Well, the more you describe Berlin, though, the more I see why you said it's like New York in the 50s, or what I imagine from movies and books that New York was like then. So must have been a really valuable time. Were these works specifically inspired by anything in Berlin or the people, or is there a story to them in some way?
Well, there is always some sort of a story. So, in short, not. They were no. They were not. They were not much different from what I was making here. They were continuation of the work that I made prior to going there. But there were variations that took place. What one easy to pinpoint was I had to take a tram from where I lived to where my studio was, and then I had to walk about one tram stop to my studio, and there was this empty lot with a lot of dried out branches, and one day I picked up some, thinking more that maybe I would use it as something to look at, and maybe I was already kind of flirting with painting. I was feeling like I want to go back to painting towards the end of my stay. And then once I had this like wood in my studio, I started actually using it in my sculptures. So it became kind of an interesting thing that I liked, that the trees were growing through the sculptures. I like that idea. But other than that, these were about human figure, and like I mentioned this with conversation with you before, like body fragmentation, but also like maybe some conversation with the idea of what a monument is, and a monument is usually to an important dictator, or a general, a president, whatever, to people in a position of power. So I make these monument inspired sculptures that are to in ordinary person, in a way, like, replacing the figures of authority, that I was always suspicious of anything projecting authority. I always tried to question authority. Yeah, and the one to the right, again, it started with the balloon, so obviously now it is about a relationship between two people. That's how I see it, because, a balloon kind of like they're trying to hold one another, but the balloon is kind of pushing them away.
Yes.
But it didn't start like that. It just started with a balloon. I can't remember why I bought balloons. I thought that maybe a balloon would be something I could use, because it's like artists don't use balloons in sculptures, right? It's very ephemeral. It's not, and then I had these heads, you see them also in the back.
Yes.
I always work with ready-mades. Yeah, I don't like to build a head from scratch. I will take a head and then build over it, sometimes, leaving some of it, sometimes covering it completely. So I had these heads and I had the balloon, and I started like just playing with it. And at one point I thought, what if, and I now remember, these two heads had, it sounds horrible, faces sawed off.
Like you found them like that?
What's that?
You found them with their
No, I bought them.
Oh.
No, these are, there was a great, huge Asian market next to my studio.
Okay.
That was thousands of square feet of retail space, and there was absolutely everything there, from food through mannequin heads, clothes, everything. Really a great place, great food, and a great place for shopping. So, because I worked with mannequins in the past, once I saw them, I came back and I bought like 20 of them, and I would do different things with them. So I was experimenting with just the front of the face. So I cut it off and I was trying to do something with it. So I had these two remaining heads without, and then it was no brainer. I had the balloon, I had these, and I like, done.
No-brainer for you, maybe, Waldek. I don't know if anyone else would have seen it. So that's very cool that you put that.
And then it took, I believe it took about 3-4 hours to make. Once I knew what I was making. It was made in one studio day, because you can't take time, because you work with plaster, it sets, and then that's it.
I think what's really stands out to me in like your stories about the twigs and the balloons and the mannequins in the store is like just the recurring like act of noticing. I mean, just like simple things that become inspiration for such like big themes and really powerful, different sorts of work. I think if we go through life numb and not noticing those little things, we miss so much. And your work shows you all the things that people are missing when they're not noticing. So thank you for sharing that with the world. And then this most recent collection is back in you're in a painting era again, maybe, or a period of painting. I loved what you taught me about this the last time we spoke. So I wondered if you could talk about the the chain between these and also what we're looking at within each of them.
Yeah. So I went back to painting a little over a year ago. And I haven't painted for about 4 years because I was doing sculpture, making sculptures. So I did a lot of meanderings. So this is very recent work, like last 6 weeks, I believe. So the whole body of work, there is about maybe close to 100 paintings that I made in about 15 months. About 60 small studies and about maybe 40 really large ones. And I essentially go between, it sort of weaves itself back and forth between more realism, less realism, more realism, less realism. Mm-hmm. And these two, well, I think you can tell that they are gravitating more into kind of sticking to the photo collage that I made. You know, when I go too far in that direction, it begins to bother me when things become too specific and too much just one thing. So then, you know, they become a bit more abstracted, or like maybe not one like type of space that makes sense. Like these two could be actual locations, right?
Yeah.
And actually the one to the right is it is an actual location. The left one is completely invented, but they feel like actual locations. And, you know, when it just becomes too much like a particular event and a particular site, it seems like it's beginning to curtail the content, like it becomes too much about one thing. So then I pull back, and it becomes maybe like two spaces that don't fit together, and maybe like narratives that don't make sense together, or like you know, this could not have really happened. So if it could not have happened, it stands for something, you know, and then it opens up the meaning a little bit more. It's a very tricky thing with that I always kind of struggled with. A very tricky thing with being a figurative artist, which I have always been. I have always been representing. I've never been an abstract artist, always representing something. That how much you want to, how specific you want to be in what you represent before it becomes just specific to one thing, one story, and one event. And then it becomes not very interesting because people can only relate to art if they can find a reflection of their own experiences. Mm-hmm. And of course, so unless you leave the content open, okay, if it's just really about your own experience, who cares? You know, if it's like, if I'm painting about my own life, you know, about a mole on my cheek, you know, like, you know. But, you know, if I make a painting about, like, let's say, some sort of a hurt, you know, like everybody hurts, so people can connect to that.
Yes. And I loved learning about the mechanism for you behind Waldek. You just spoke about, how things are recognizable, but they're not, and like the value to that. I'd like to hear a bit more about your process. So I remember you mentioning like how you found this couch on the internet and like how you take photographs and different elements and make them unrecognizable. But what does that mean?
So I think a misconception of how content is being built in a painting is that it all starts in one's head, that we are thinking of like our big idea, let's say war, destruction, what would illustrate that, and then we kind of build the painting in our mind, and we then just execute it. Mm-hmm. My students very often think about their work that way, and I've been trying to tell them that making a painting is very different from writing a story, because making a painting is not verbal. So making a painting in your head is verbal, because you are telling yourself, oh, there will be a ruined building to the right, and there, you're using words and you're writing a story. And then when you think that you have written a story, now all you need to do is to paint it. It turns out that, let's say you imagine a blue sky, but then that's an abstract. The blue you're going to use is a particular blue that you have at your disposal, a particular blue that you can make. And like now it becomes specific, and very often it's not adequate, or it's not what, like we imagine this blue glow, and here there is this flat, bathroom blue, kind of a thing. So I like to start in a very, in a way that is very, I really don't know what I'm going to make. So maybe the left one is a good example of. So I've been making paintings that speak of like war zones, and I'm very bothered, as many people are, with the ongoing civil war in Syria. I've been digging out quite a bit of images from photographs from Syria's ruined neighborhoods, as well as Yemen, a horrible conflict there. So I would know that I would try to see if I can find something in the news photos, talking specifically about these two, coming from these areas. And so you start a search, cities in war zones, something like that, and you look at what pops up. And actually the picture that caught my attention was not from Syria or not from a war zone, but it was a photograph of a building being demolished here in the US to make room for new construction. So I took that photograph, and I started working with it in the Photoshop, and you would never recognize if I showed you the photograph, you would never think that I used that photograph for this painting, because I completely remade it. Because I wanted certain ambience and certain type of space, certain type of lighting, like this dark pile of rubble. In the photograph, it was in full sun, you know, and it had a different shape, and it was completely different. And then I told you before that I also did a bunch of photographs of myself in my studio, also not exactly knowing what I was doing or why I was taking these photographs, but I thought I needed some reference to a figure, to a human figure. So when I eventually made this image in its Photoshop version, I realized that actually I could plug in myself in there to kind of make the content a little more oblique, like it's not this like desolate story, desolate city, but you know, there's life there, and maybe the person there is not like running away, or you know, but picking something, or like who knows what he's doing there, right? Like kind of make it more difficult to build a straight story out of it. Yeah, making it less direct. Yeah,
Yes.
And that's it. And I painted. So I finished it in Photoshop and made a small study, and then made a bigger painting. And the one to the right, I told you also the story that I was under the impression of the work by a friend of mine, Tom Nakashima, who paints these like cages and boxes. So I just looked at his work, and I was like, box, cage, enclosure. But again, going into photographs from like war zones. And I was actually looking at a video from Yemen. And, you know, as the video was playing, I saw my room that I kind of, you know, was both just the room I wanted, and also the subject that I've been working with. And then with the hole in the ceiling, and the idea of a blue sky from the painting before.
Mm-hmm.
Because the blue sky, I think it's pretty obvious. It's like the moment of hope there, which also is like trying to make it not just all black or all white, but kind of, yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for talking through those different themes. And I love that there's some ambiguity in what the story is, because I think that's always true. I haven't thought about this in years, but I used to do mock trial in high school where you like have a court competition. And I remember our coach always saying there's his side, there's her side, and there's the truth. And like when you look at art, when you look at the world, just in general, you know, there's so many different truths out there, and whatever is going to resonate with people is going to be the truth that matters. And I think that comes through here too. So it's been so fun to look through the pieces, but I want to come back for a second to your role formerly as a professor. You talk about, you know, the influence of politics in your work and it having, you know, this deeply personal meaning. How does that translate into your role when you have students? Like, what is your goal when you work with people who are trying to grow in their professional, like, art pursuits?
Yeah, it goes back to I just didn't at the beginning, I didn't speak very highly of my professors. However, I had a mentor prior to attending the academy, a Polish artist by the name Janusz Petrykowski. Also worked with his wife, Lydia Serafin, and they were two artists, and especially Janusz, that if anybody shaped me as an artist, he did, even though, we worked only for a couple of months, but then we became friends. So we would be in touch and we would always talk about art, and he would always give critiques, when I was a student. He was my real professor. So in contrast, I was like not very happy with my professors at the academy because they seemed to be very absent, while he was very present, in his art and in the way he taught art. So I wanted to, and I understood how important it was to me, for me, what he did. I realized that a good teacher makes a world of difference. So I became interested in teaching, and saw it as a way to provide income, so I don't have to rely on selling art if anybody can rely on it. Therefore, I would have like all the artistic freedom that I would want, but do something that is close to art making, which is teaching art. And the more I taught, the more important it has become, and it has been over the years very, very important. And I benefited at least in as many ways from teaching as my students benefited from me being a teacher. It was always a two-way street, and the older I became and the more experience I had as a teacher, my respect for the student would continue as an independent artist, as an original independent artist, has grown more and more. I always did not appreciate the attitude of a professor talking down to an apprentice. Also because my mentor, I knew nothing and I was 17 and he was already an accomplished artist. And he would say, "We artists," like I was immediately included and kind of, I was respected as, an artist. I was seen as an artist, even though I was not, yeah. So that would be the type of relationship that I would have with my students, like a partnership, not a master apprentice. And I truly learned from seeing my students grow and develop their work. And I always warned them jokingly, "I'm going to steal your ideas if they are good." And I did. And I said, "You can steal mine if you want to." Artists are big thieves. And it was extremely rewarding to be a teacher. It was very, very rewarding. As rewarding as making art. And, I got to a point that I really needed to retire, where I thought I have a set amount, well, we all have a set amount of time on earth, but mine is more than yours. And I thought, you know, I want now all of that time to my studio, but I always worked consistently in my studio my entire life since I started studying. I was always a working, practicing artist, but now I'm even more so. So, you know, that part of my life is behind. However, students still get in touch with me and ask me to critique, and I love to do that. And I may continue. If they ask me, I will always have time for them.
It's how you know you did something right? People are still looking to you for advice. And I love what you said about, you know, we talk about this in social work a lot too, of like leveling the hierarchy and not letting that be what rules the classroom or the world or just anything. And I can say too, you know, it's hard as a student to come in as the youngest or as the lowest, as like the bottom of everything. You're the bottom of everything, and you're expected to, in that being the bottom, also be empowered and do great things. And it's much nicer when someone who's not at the bottom says to you, you're not at the bottom, like you're alongside me, you're my partner, I see the value that you bring. And I think that your teaching did probably an awesome job of that, from how you're describing that. So it made a difference.
Empowerment is probably the most powerful tool in teaching, and for sure in teaching art. There is nothing more powerful, and nothing that will bring the results quickly and in dimensions that are meaningful than just empowering a student. I experienced that more times that I can remember, that that students would be. I have mice in my studio, and I just thought that I saw a little face between my fridge and but maybe I was just seeing it.
Are they like friendly ones, like Mickey and Minnie? Maybe it's okay.
Yeah. I have a live trap here, so if no, maybe I just was. So yeah, I experienced that, extremely rewarding, knowing that you know, rather than, you know, telling a student you did this wrong and you did that wrong and you could do better this. It's like what one is doing, saying that, is one is projecting their own taste and their own experience and their own life story on somebody who has a completely different set of skills and completely different life story. So instead of that, I would say, like you mentioned before, like I would find the things, and you can always find strengths, always, you know, and I say, how about, you know, if you know, emphasize that, or if you built on that, and then they would say, yeah, but it seems so unimportant. It seems like, I said, no, it's about you, and it is important, and you know, and that's all I will say. Kind of like I last years I was telling my students, I teach without any teaching, you know. I just encourage, empower, and it always works.
I love that. It's a good takeaway, regardless of if you're an artist or not. This is what we need to do as people in the world, is just encourage each other to find our voice. So I think we've touched on this throughout the conversation, but I want to make sure that you have a chance to say it explicitly. Waldek, why does art matter? Why do we all need to keep thinking about this, doing it? Why do students need to keep coming up and practicing it? What does it mean for your life?
If you try to imagine removing art in anything artful from the world, I mean, we would not recognize the world, right? That we would have, you know, boxes for houses and, you know, artists, designers are in everything, you know, that, you know, anything you look at, anything you deal with was made to be not only functional, but also beautiful. So I think it's intrinsic to human nature that we are not satisfied with just the plain utilitarian in the one that, you know, we need the sublime, we need I think it helps us kind of find the reason for our being here, or it elevates us, or it transports us places. So yeah, when there were humans, there was art, you know, since time recorded, you know.
So true. Such an important part of the human experience and the human narrative. I mean, how would we capture anything, remember anything without it too? So finally, Waldek, I want to ask you, what do you want people to leave knowing about you and about your work? If you were to sum it up, which is not an easy thing to do.
Well, I don't want to sum it up because, you know, I'm not done. I'm not finished. Yeah. So, and I will never be finished. But maybe a thing to say that I've said very often to my students that. One of the most important, if not the most important, one of the most important things in life is to find something to do that you like and that you're passionate about. Okay, otherwise you're going to be really miserable. You know, you will be miserable. So I would always tell students that very often worry, and they have good reasons to worry about their future, their financial future, how they are going to manage in life. And, you know, maybe, you know, they should pick a different direction. And, you know, I would ask them, you know, do you like what you make, the reason you're here? Yeah, I love it. Then, you know, don't worry about it, because the point is, you know, to love what you make, and, you know, to be content every day of your life, because you're doing what is important, as opposed to, oh, I can't wait for the weekend, and like, what do you do? Oh, it's only a job. What do you do in life? Oh, it's only that's a tough life to live, even though, you know, your job may be paying all the bills, etc. And there are, you know, American system is tougher than the European system. It's harder to survive here than it is in Europe. Okay, but still, you know, you're going to survive. You know, maybe you will never have a brand new car, you know, or maybe you never buy a car, or maybe, you know, but you will be happy, you know, you will be content, you will feel like, and also definitely feeling like you're contributing to the society, which is why I see my teaching as extremely rewarding, you know, all the 40 plus years of teaching that I did, because I know that I passed on something that was given to me, you know, you know, my teacher gave me something, and I gave something to my students, and I know that some of my former students are already teachers, you know, and they are, you know, and sometimes, you know, they get in touch, you know. I've been their teacher 20 years ago, and, you know, out of the blue, they will email me and thank me, and they say, you know, how much difference it made, you know, for them to be in my class. Yeah, so yeah, those two things, you know, be
Those
happy
are
with what you do, and it's great if you're making a contribution.
those are big things, and they're so important. And I think I mean, I can't speak to Europe, but definitely in the US we get so caught up in the worry of being able to do the things that we think we have to do. But really we can make life a bit simpler than that, and focus on, I mean, I need food, I water, shelter, like, but they don't have to be the new car, like you said, or whatever. And how much more fulfilling when our motivations or our destinations are not just the new car or the new whatever, but something that lasts and is intergenerational, and all the things um, that you mentioned. So I think that's really special. Um, what are you looking forward to, Waldek, then? Is my last thing.
Um, Probably to live someplace warmer than Milwaukee. That would be number one. And rather than that, you know, I'm fairly content. I have a beautiful family. I have a new grandson.
So
I have grown up grandchildren. Um, you know, just make art and be content. And
I
yeah,
love that. Just enjoying life, it sounds like, and being appreciative for it are things we should all
right,
be
right.
doing. Well, Waldek, it's been so special. Thank you so much for taking the time to explain your work and your process and the ways you notice the world. I think that those are really powerful and important things, and I'm excited to implement that in my own life, in art and out. So thank you.
And I want to thank you because you've done it extremely well. The you know, the conversation that we had, and your questions were very thoughtful, and it's been great talking to you. Yes, so thank you for the opportunity.